Wel, diolch yn fawr iawn I chi weinidog am eich amser heddiw yma. Thank you very much to the Minister, Rebecca Evans, the Minister for Economy, Energy and Planning. Now, to get our ambitions and our aspirations flowing, our next speaker is a multi-award-winning geopolitical advisor, leadership coach and futurist who NASA has described as a walking encyclopedia of the future. He has helped build and lead several multi-billion-dollar business units for Atos, Dell EMC and IBM, and his ability to identify, track and explain the impacts of emerging technologies and trends on global business, culture and society has had him working with renowned brands such as Accenture, Coca-Cola, Deloitte, Microsoft and many others. And to top it all, he went to university in North Wales. So please welcome Fanatical Futurist Matthew Griffin to the stage. Please make him feel welcome.
Hey, how are you guys? Oh, it sounds like we should have a bake-off. I said, how are you? He's all right. He's all right. That's it. How are you guys? Woo, woo, yeah, yeah. Here we go. I love the energy in the room. It's amazing, right? It's just teeing me up really nicely here. So, my name is Matthew Griffin. I'm the CEO and founder of the 311 Institute. We're a global futures and deep futures think tank working up to 50 years out. I work with royal households, both in the UK as well as the Abu Dhabi royal family. I work with almost all G77 countries. So with the governments that I work with, for example, in Europe, one of the first conversations that we have is, what do we do about GDP growth? Which is very exciting indeed. And I work with the world's largest organizations. Now, when we actually have a look at companies like Google, for example, I actually, ironically, advise them on the future of artificial intelligence and the impact that AI will have on their workforce and the impact that it will have on the structure of the company itself. With companies like Walmart, we are trying to reskill 2 million people. Companies like Pepsi, we are restructuring the entire organization. Companies like Nokia and Huawei, we've seen huge amounts of disruption, but in Huawei's case, they've taken disruption and they're growing 3 times faster than they ever have, despite being banned from their core markets. So when we actually have a look at the world around us, this is what we're going to be going through. It helps to go the right way, doesn't it? Here we go. This is designed to be an insightful but provocative presentation for a variety of different reasons. When I went to university in Bangor, I took marine biology and oceanography, which ironically is quite a future-proof career at that point, but we didn't take any computer sciences or anything else. When we think about cybersecurity, for example, 6 months ago, we saw the first fully autonomous cybersecurity weapons systems. We can develop new malware basically in 5 minutes. So when we talk about cybersecurity, even that is changing. So we're going to be looking through ambition, aspiration, and acceleration. Now, when you have a look at the world around you, there's just one thing that's changing, right? Just the one thing. And we can generally get our heads around one thing, unless it's that thing. Because if it's this thing, then from an individual perspective, how do we understand what's changing? How do we see what's changing? How do we figure out the impact of all these changes at an individual level? When we think about this at a professional level, we see AI companies talking about almost the full automation of work, for example. When we think about things at the company level, things are changing so fast. We saw ChatGPT emerging in 2016. But despite having a 7-year head start, there was not a single organization, basically whether it was Accenture, whether it was Microsoft, that was ready basically for 2022 when we saw actual ChatGPT emerge. So from a business perspective, how do we actually manage when the world around us is accelerating faster and faster and faster? Now, with change, with great change, comes great threats. We see these changes affecting your business models, your companies, your markets, your consumer habits, and all these different kinds of things. Every threat to you is actually an opportunity, and every opportunity is an opportunity, which means that as business leaders and as a country, the only thing that we actually have in front of us is opportunity. Now, when we actually have a look at some of these opportunities, there is not a single industry on the planet that is actually not going through a core disruption. So when we digitize an industry, we erode the boundaries between all these different industries. And so companies like Google, like Meta, like Amazon, and so on and so forth can just move seamlessly between all these industries. They can move into entertainment, retail, they can move into insurance, financial services. When you think about Vodacom down in South Africa, for example, yes, they're a telco, but actually they're moving more and more into financial services. But increasingly, when we think about digital, we're moving into a post-digital world. Because if you start embedding artificial intelligence within your company, are you undertaking a digital transformation or an intelligence transformation? If it's an intelligence transformation, then the partners that you select are different. The investments that you make are different. How you structure your company and your processes are different. But today, when we have a look at farming, for example, to switch basically from today's traditional agricultural farming system to vertical farms, cellular agriculture, as we're seeing with Dyson down in the southwest of England, for example, that's a $350 trillion switch. When we think about construction, we see the uplift of green construction, but in Dubai, we are 3D printing an 11-story skyscraper. In the United States, when we have a look at the United States military, we are 3D printing barracks, forward operating bases. When we have a look at companies like Big, they are 3D printing entire communities, but we are 3D printing entire residential communities 95% faster than we can build them for 95% less cost. When we think about energy, we are moving from a fossil fuel world to an electrified world. 40% of the world's total energy supply is now electrified. This is a $92 trillion shift. When we think about financial services, we have traditional banks. Yes, we have fintechs, which I still say basically are traditional banks with a fancy interface. Because the bank business model is they take our money in, they loan that out, and we as consumers get very little in return. But when you have a look at companies like Revolut, for example, Revolut is increasingly merging fintech with decentralized finance and crypto. So now basically you can start staking crypto and everything else, and you can get up to a 22% yield. So when we have a look at finance, we have robo-wealth advisors going into companies like Robinhood. Finance is fundamentally changing at every single level, whether it's a cybersecurity level, a business level, a consumer and key markets perspective. When we have a look at healthcare, 2 years ago, we took somebody in the UK as well as in the United States, and they had a genetic condition called Hunter's syndrome. The good news with Hunter's syndrome is that you die in 20 years. The bad news is that you die painfully over that 20-year period. Using advanced genetic engineering technologies like CRISPR and Cas, we put that individual into a hospital bed, gave him an advanced gene therapy. 30 minutes later, he got out of the bed. He's now cured. Genetic engineering alone basically allows us to cure 6,000 incurable diseases. When we think about organs, in Israel, we have 3D printed human hearts. In the University of Oxford, we're 3D printing human skin for burns victims. When we think about cancer treatments, we have got 3 cancer treatments that are now 100% effective for stage 4. These are human hybrid immune systems. When we think about factories, in Europe, we talk about Industry 5. In China, they talk about fully autonomous dark factories. When you think about BYD and Xiaomi, their factories are fully autonomous and pitch black inside. When we have a look at entertainment, for example, we're seeing artificial intelligence generate the first proto-movies. We saw this emerging in 2016. I did a talk on it to Bloomberg in 2016. Text to anything, voice to anything. What happens when everybody can create the content that they want without the need for a Hollywood studio, without the need for an editing team? When we think about retail in Southeast Asia, increasingly more and more millennials are actually using virtual reality. One of the biggest malls in Hong Kong is a 45,000 store virtual reality mall. And we won't necessarily see it here because headsets are still clunky and everything else. But retail is changing. Today, basically, we have agentic commerce. So today you have a website. You spent a huge amount of money as businesses on SEO. But now I simply go into an AI agent, type in what I'm looking for, it shows me things, I buy it through OpenAI's chatbot, and off we go. If you think about Google, Google was disrupted in the space of 18 months. They earn $64 billion a year just from advertising. Google used to be a search engine. Now you use it, it is not a search engine. It is an answer engine. These are fundamental shifts that affect the world's biggest companies and the world's smallest companies. When we think about communications, we see organizations like Starlink and SpaceX putting 14,000 satellites into low Earth orbit to connect every single person on Earth. By 2030, we think we will have another 500 million connected people. If you are a digital business, what do you do when you have 500 more million potential customers? Taking the total to about 5 to 5.5 billion connected consumers. When we think about transport, increasingly we have organizations, whether it is Airbus, whether it is Uber, whether it is Volvo, whether it is Waymo, trying to take the driver out of the vehicle. And then we are electrifying the vehicle, or we're running vehicles on hydrogen. There is not a single industry on the planet that is not going through some form of transformation. Then as a country, as entrepreneurs, as businesses, are you at the edge of that? Are you leaning into it? Are you grabbing those opportunities with both hands? So from a Wales perspective, there are 3.2 million of us. Every single one of you, increasingly, can use artificial intelligence to develop a product. And if you know how to execute, you can tap into almost every single person on the planet. One of my clients is the Manchester Airport Group. They have about 65 million passengers coming through the airports every year. Their consumer base is 65 million passengers. However, they've developed new super apps. These super apps are now turning over £300 million. They're on track for £1 billion. Why? Because if you have a digital component to your business, you can sell to anyone on the planet with an internet connection. One individual in Wales basically can touch 5 billion connected people. That's your opportunity. How well are you leaning into that? Every European government that I work with, basically whether it is Sweden, whether it is Finland, basically where I am tomorrow, whether it is Germany, Spain, France, Italy, the UK, complain basically that our economies are stagnating. Every European economy is going to be posting sub 2% GDP growth. In the UK, it's about 0.2, our projection. This creates societal problems because we have high interest rates, we've got a high cost of living, we've got low growth, which means generally lower taxes, which means we all get taxed more and then we feel things are worse. So we need to turbocharge growth. And that's partly what this presentation is about. Now, when we think about ambition, for example, this is what I see separates the people that do incredibly well, the countries that do incredibly well from the others. How ambitious are you really? From a business perspective, if you're looking to post 2 to 3 to 5% growth, that's great. But let's take you through some of the ambitious people that you know, but let's take you through the ambitions that they talk about. These are planet-changing playbooks. And some of these are open to all of you. Elon Musk wants to use humanoid robots to automate all physical labor. He estimates it is a $25 trillion market. Elon Musk also wants to automate all mobility. That is a $5 trillion market opportunity. He also wants to merge with Neuralink AI and humans. And he's not doing bad at the moment. With Starlink, he wants to connect the planet. We estimate that that is a $36 billion a year revenue stream just to get started. That funds his ambitions for Mars. It also disrupts every single telco, which is something, basically, I was telling the British telcos 15 years ago, and they're now starting to see that. He also wants to power the entire planet with around 100 gigafactories sustainably. And then he also wants to leave the planet. But he's actually said that he wants to die on Mars, just not on impact, which is nice. Now, when we have a look at Sir Demis Hassabis of DeepMind from London, his ambition is to solve intelligence. That is an ambition. He wants to solve intelligence. Partly because he believes that when you solve intelligence, you can then use that to solve everything else. When we think about Sam Altman wants to develop an artificial intelligence that automates all cognitive work behind a screen. This is the official definition of AGI from the OpenAI board. Artificial general intelligence is an AI that can outperform all humans at all economically valuable work. That is lawyers, that's creatives, that's software developers, that is consultants. And we're seeing this feeding through to companies like McKinsey right now. Now, when we have a look at skills in the future of work, AI has already taken the half-life of traditional workplace skills down to 5 years. When we have a look at technical skills, the half-life of most technical skills is now 2.5 years. But this is the surprise number. Over the past 3 years, artificial intelligence is automating different skills 66% faster. If you think about the AI revolution today, we are spending $5.7 trillion on AI data centers, nuclear power stations, GPUs, training models. This is the ambition that we face from the United States especially. Sam Altman also, indirectly, wants to automate all entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship. And in fact, the official commercial definition between Microsoft and OpenAI for artificial general intelligence is an AI that generates $100 billion in profit by itself. Not by us selling it, but by it doing its own things. And in fact, both DeepMind and OpenAI believe that this should be the new Turing test. They believe that the new Turing test should be whether or not artificial general intelligence can build, scale, and operate a company. Now, you might know this guy. He's Brian. And I don't know who this other guy is. Now, the sound on this might be slightly cronky. The reason I'm showing you this is because when we think that we are ambitious as entrepreneurs, as companies, as countries, this is what we're actually up against.
Highly performant smaller teams, thanks to these tools and these technologies, are going to be able to do so much more. Is that a trend you're seeing from the startups growing around y'all in Cerebral Valley?
We're going to see 10-person billion-dollar companies pretty soon, like billion-dollar valuations. And the thing that in my little group chat with my tech CEO friends, there's this betting pool for the first year that there's a 1-person billion-dollar company, which would have been unimaginable without AI, and now will happen.
I'm so happy you said that, because I literally just wrote that out in a letter to my LPs for an AGM. This is a radical idea, and it gets even more exciting when you remember none of us ever, or all of us who have built companies to even more than 100 people, don't miss back when it was smaller. And I think there's going to be a new drug, the exact opposite of that ZERP phenomenon, where CEOs and founders are going to just be so excited to get up and go to work with, much smaller, much more performant, much more stronger culturally teams. And I'm also kind of bummed I'm not on that CEO group chat, but we can table that for later. But I think this feels like a seminal moment, and I get you all are not, sitting around patting yourselves on the back, but it's a big deal.
So, we're up against some incredibly ambitious people, and we know what those ambitions are. So, Aspiration. One of the countries that I work with is the UAE, with Dubai. Dubai has 3.7 million people. The government in Dubai has just announced that they want to triple the number of people in Dubai. Now, Dubai basically wants to grow their economy. This is Dubai. This is not UAE. This is Dubai, the city. Wants to grow their economy to a GDP of about $350 billion. Now, Wales' GDP at the moment is about 108 billion. So, how's Dubai doing it? Now, I've been working with Dubai for about 10 years. It's not one thing. If you want to accelerate the GDP of a country, basically, it's not one thing. It's lots of rather random things. They built airports back in the 1970s to bring people in. They bought 70 kilometers of beach, basically, to diversify the economy to tourism. Yes. However, basically, the culture of Dubai, everyone in Dubai wants to build a company. When we have a look at, for example, education, they are educating 1 million people on how to program with AI. Now, in addition to that, rather random one, basically, they have some of the world's largest event spaces. Why? Because if you have a gigantic event hall, then you can bring in some of the world's largest conferences. And then people come to the cities, they spend money in those cities, basically, and they all start thinking, this is the place that brings everyone together. It's a little bit like Lisbon with Web Summit. There's a lot of startups around Web Summit. Why? Because there's a gigantic conference there. When we have a look at things like infrastructure, yes, they've built infrastructure and everything else. That's it, like the Burj Khalifa, but also they inspire. If you want to get a country moving, you need to be able to motivate people and inspire people. They've made investment. They're leaning in. The government is all about the future. Everything they talk about is, this is what we are doing, this is what the future looks like, this is how you can grasp it. Talent. They're investing huge amounts in fundamentally redoing the curriculum. We're teaching a curriculum that is 100 years old in most cases. When I went to university, AI wasn't on the agenda, let alone anything else, despite the fact it was a 60-year-old technology then. They have tolerance and they have vision. It's the same with Saudi Arabia. They have a vision. It's the same with China. They have a vision. They say, that's where we're going. And they drive it. Promoting and uplifting an entire country is not rocket science. It is actually not hard. But you need people who can do it. And now, you've seen a lot of things that I think basically will probably make you slightly nervous. The ambition of the Americans, let alone the execution of the Chinese. So what? Every threat is an opportunity. Consider this. We change the world at 69 milliseconds now. When a new artificial intelligence model is released, it takes 69 milliseconds to be available on the other side of the planet. ChatGPT 5 basically cost $1 billion to train. When they pressed release, you had instant access to whatever it did. Did you know that ChatGPT has an IQ of 155? Google Gemini has an IQ of 136. When you are talking to these AIs, even though we can't really directly link human intelligence with an AI intelligence, I get that, but this is how we're measuring these things, you are conversing with an artificial intelligence with an Einstein-level IQ that has increased 51% in 3 years. When we have a look at knowledge, with ChatGPT alone, you are accessing a system with 1,000 times more general knowledge than any human. It learns 300 million times faster, which, in Geoffrey Hinton's words, who is the godfather of artificial intelligence, he says, AI is now a fundamentally superior learning algorithm to the human brain. You have access to this. Every single one of you, whether you are 99 or whether you are 9. You have access to this, and this is going faster and further. Now, I'll give you an example. Why don't we build a Welsh Microsoft? Artificial intelligence, 1 month ago, Claude Anthropic did 30 hours of continuous coding, and it cloned Microsoft Teams and Slack. What if you could clone Microsoft? It's an entire enterprise portfolio in 30 seconds. That is a thing we talk about with Salesforce, Workday, and Microsoft. This gets faster. If we can clone Microsoft Teams in 30 hours, that's the slowest we'll ever be able to do it. So what happens when everyone in Wales goes, I'm just going to clone Salesforce? Off we go. Even if you were never trained in software development or AI. Computer chips. We've seen AIs, basically with the IEEE consortium, developing 100 new computer chip designs at phenomenal speed. So we think about the semiconductor hubs, basically in southern Wales. Here's 1,000 new computer chip designs. Pick one. AI designed the world's fastest computer chip recently, and when they looked at it, no one knew how it worked because it had done it in a completely different way to the way that we would have done it. In Silico, in Australia, used artificial intelligence to develop 30,000 new drugs in 21 days. So what about the biotech hubs based in Wales? What could you do at that speed? In fact, speed is your problem. And Demis, Sir Demis, believes basically that in 10 years, artificial intelligence will be able to cure every disease. Part of the reason for this is because in 6 months, it simulated over 300 million proteins that Google then made freely available. In 2 weeks, AI developed 380,000 new materials. Companies like Toyota are building new lithium-ion batteries that are have fundamentally different chemistries in 2 weeks that would take 2 years. This is an acceleration technology. If you have the ambition to change things at a grand scale, increasingly I can show you the technology that you can do to help you with that. Grok 4 and GPT-5. Although we can query basically how they measure this and everything else, they have post-PhD level intelligence. You can tap into that. Proto-AGI, which we estimate is before 2030, we will have an IQ of 1,600. What happens when everyone in Wales has access to an AI with an IQ of 1,600? What happens when everyone in Wales increasingly has almost free access to intelligence? Free access, not to information, but to knowledge. You can try this right now. What happens when everyone in Wales has access to free skills? The 3.2 million people basically in Wales, basically, let's face it, not a lot of them can do software development. But with AI, increasingly, You just tell it what you want it to create. And you need some skills at the back of that now. But in 2-3 years' time, it'll just go, there you go, I've published it. Off you go. Here's your marketing plan done. So what happens when AI democratizes access to skills? You might not know how to make music, but AI can make music. You might not be an artist, but it creates art. You might not know how to create a reel or a movie. AI knows how to do that. You don't know how to create whatever it happens to be. You don't know how to create new drugs, new materials. Text to material, text to drug base is already here. All for that. All for the less than the price of a coffee. So what you now need, in order to really grasp the future, you have got to take action. If you don't act, if you don't think about the implications of what I'm showing you and you go, yeah, it's nice, great, but you fundamentally don't rethink things, you stay the same. That's fine. Other people will overtake you. Talent. With companies like Walmart and Pepsi, basically, we are using artificial intelligence to teach people new things 12 times faster. My daughter is dyslexic. We taught her a year's worth of topics in 3 weeks. So ambition and opportunity. You have all of this at your fingertips. So now what do you do with this power that you have? My first suggestion would be learn about it, experiment with it, play about with it, figure out what it's good at, what it's bad at. And then basically have your Horizon 1 strategy as a business. Have your Horizon 2 and Horizon 3. So you play the short game, you play the long game. And that's how you start taking on the world. So thank you very much for listening. There we go.